of captivity. This is Chronicle number 56. As you recall, in Chronicle number 55, I was telling you about some of the things that I would do to pass my time while I was in solitary confinement at the Supermax in Florence, Colorado. Federal Supermax. It's called the ADX, Administrative Maximum. And, there's all kinds of people there that have all kinds of notoriety. And not everyone is there because they did something horrible. Some people are there because they are very high level protection cases. Okay? Other people are there for escapes. I saw people that I knew from Leavenworth while I was there. And it was like, wow. One guy had escaped. He went to Canada and they caught him living in a van. He was just parked at the end of this street in some region of Canada, I forget what they call it, some kind of they've got their own name for the areas, but yeah, it was really weird, and I had seen at least 3 people that I knew who had, like Ron Bright. Ron Bright was my buddy. He and I had been together in Lewisburg in the basement, and we meditated together. We did the home correspondence course in City Yoga. We both were on that same program, and we saw a lot of different stuff, weird stuff, right? Like one night there was these meteors or some kind of fireballs that just rocketed through the sky. There was a couple of them, one right after the other, and we both saw it. It was like 3 a.m. I yelled next door to him. I said, "Man, you won't believe what I just saw." He said, "Man, you won't believe what I just saw." And it was the same thing, right? And then, we've seen things like birds. One time we saw a flock of birds flying backwards. I don't know if it was just a wind gust or whatever, but the whole flock was flying backwards, way up in the sky. Another time, because at Lewisburg, in the basement, the old basement, your cell came up to, ground level was about chest high, and you had a window, a big window. It had bars and everything, but it was glass, and you could look right out onto the ground. And, there's all kinds of things going on. There were cat fights. I saw the best actual cat fight that I've ever seen. It was this old, grizzled cat, one eye, blinded, just big scar across, closed. Or, you could open it a little bit, it looked like, but the eye was just opaque or opaque. It was just like white and, ugly. And you could tell he had a little bit of age on it. And he had pieces, bites, scratch, scars all over him. He was right by my window, right in front of my window, early morning, one morning. Because I like to get up in the mornings early and walk. Love to just pace the cage, just pacing back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This cat was just super fantastic. It was just, this cat was so tough and so experienced, and just, this other cat, much bigger actually, younger, came up and bared its, hunched its back and made those sounds and everything, and little dude was just kind of on the ground a little bit, like low, and just, snarling back. And then all of a sudden they got like about a foot away from each other, and then whoom, just like boom, a flash of just like a spark. Wham! They just went at it. And I mean, there was fur flying. This was a fight. They were fighting. And the little gray cat, the older guy, he won. He ran the other one off. The other one had enough. Took off. And yeah, I guess, I don't know. I guess it wouldn't the right to mate then. So he probably went off and got himself. But yeah, a lot of strange things that we saw. But I wanted to point out that while I was at ADX, while I was meditating and reading and studying and pacing, I was also writing. And I was writing a memoir. And it was called Pacing the Cage. The way that I got that title was from a song by Bruce Cockburn under the same title, Pacing the Cage. You can't copyright titles. So I just call it my book, my memoir, Pacing the Cage. And I've worked on it every single day in and day out. I mean, you know, I would rewrite an entire page like nothing. 3, 4, 5 times sometimes I would rewrite. I mean, it was nothing. The exercise was to get it as good as it could be gotten. And I had taught myself earlier in my prison days, I had taught myself English composition, English grammar, sentence structure. I had studied a lot of literature, a lot of great writers. So I had a little bit of all of that, and then I had a lot of time to practice. So I've got this memoir going, and I get it. It's about 560 pages, and it's pretty tightly written. It's all handwritten, whole thing. 560 pages. And so I go to send it out, save up, I get all the stamps together. You know, it's media rate because it's a manuscript. So I put media mail or media rate on it. And outgoing media mail is not supposed to be inspected or opened. It's your First Amendment right to correspond with legitimate media, right? So I was sending it out as media mail, and I was sending it to Jim Ridgeway down in Washington, D.C., Solitary Watch. He's dead now, but he was a legitimate dude, a legitimate media outlet. I mean, I don't know how you define it, but yeah, they were putting out media. And I was sending it to him for safekeeping, to make a copy, send me a copy back, take that copy, and send it probably somewhere else to a third party to hold on to. So what happens is this. I'm just, I got my blanket on the floor. I'm doing calisthenics. I'm doing my rec deck exercises. And here comes a counselor making rounds. And he's with this SIS dude. And they stop in front of my cell. I'm on the floor just watching them, through the window and everything. They look in and see me on the floor. Break cell 213 or whatever I was in. So they break the door and they come into the sally port, and the dude's got my envelope. I can see the writing on it, right? The address and everything. And it's open at the top. It just slid open. And so he proceeds to tell me that his office has read this manuscript and that I cannot send it out of there. And he's got all these little tabs marked all the way through it. And, when I when I said, well, what are your objections to it? What's wrong with it? There's nothing there that's of any objectionable material at all. Zero, nothing. And he's like, well, just look at all the notes we made throughout it. So they had went through almost every page of the manuscript. And wherever I mentioned a name or wherever I mentioned an incident or whatever, they had written in the margins and had highlighted it and went through all of this really very comprehensive and critically comprehensive editing and analysis of this thing, right? So they give me the envelope and they tell me, this can't go out. You're going to have to correct all of this stuff that we've marked, and then we'll go through it again and make sure you did, and blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, wow, holy cow, what kind of stuff is this? Because now, to me, being able to send privileged mail, media mail and legal mail, to send and to receive was absolutely critical. It was absolutely 100% critical. In my mind, if you started tampering with those, started cutting those off, then, then your lifeline to the outside world is dead. It's like being buried alive and having one oxygen tube or one ventilation tube coming down into wherever you're buried, and all of a sudden, somebody closes the vent. Yeah, that's what it felt like. And so, I started to think about, what could I do to protest? What could I do to let these folks know that it wasn't just going to happen like that without any consequences or any repercussions. So the first thing I did was, of course, try to get a BP-8 from the regular counselor when he went around. Jones was his name. What a lazy son of a bitch. What a piece of shit, too. Jones. He knows who he is. But this guy was a snake in the grass, man. I'm telling you. He didn't even come in. He only came in 3 days a week for about 3 hours. He made his rounds in the control unit, and out the door he would go. Talk about criminals. These guys collect, it wasn't just him, a lot of them. Just phone it in real quick. They show up, they leave. They get paid. Some of them, many of them, don't even show up. They don't even show up. They got such a system set up, or did have, and I'm sure they still do, that, this counselor named Arroyo, Juan Arroyo, what a piece of shit he was. What a piece of work he was. Yeah, he knows who he is too. And all the dirty shit that he did to everybody down there. But, these guys wouldn't show up for work. Arroyo sometimes take a week or two off. Who's going to say anything? Is the guy in the bubble that sees who's coming in and going out, is he going to say something? If there's no meeting scheduled, no upper level exec staff meetings, if it's all just a phone it in type deal, make your rounds and you're free to go. Yeah, they were playing on that big time. And that was messing with me, because I would try to get a BP-8, because you first have to file this informal attempt to resolve, right? So you got to go through that bullshit, and it is, because you're just wasting time, right? It just gives them an opportunity to spin you a little bit. Can't give you a BPA. If you see the counselor or somebody, right? Let's say you see a case manager. I don't issue BPAs, BP9s. That's up to the counselor. Well, the counselor hasn't been in for several days. I don't know anything about that. He's scheduled to be in, I think on Monday, catch him then. And down the range you go. So you're stuck in a cage. You have no, the kind of frustration with this absolute isolation, absolute control, absolute madness, just straight up madness. And so I started to think, man, how am I going to do anything? How am I going to make them pay consequences? I can't go to the courts. I'd already lost my faith in the federal courts then. And nothing was happening anyway. That was completely dead anyway. Now I couldn't get the grievances through for a lot of different reasons. I'll tell you about them. I'll tell you some of the tricks, some of the games that they play regularly at the ADX. I'll tell you all about it in the very next Chronicle because we don't have time right now. But this is Chronicle number 56. I will tell you all about the games that FBOP officials play at ADX, Florence, the Supermax in Colorado. I'll see you. This is Chronicle 56. I'll see you for Chronicle 57.